As researchers and innovators, you recognize the power health and care data has to improve services and discover new treatments. But gaining access to this data can seem confusing and complex, particularly when it comes to understanding the duty of confidentiality. Whenever an individual shares information with health and care services, they expect that information to be treated as confidential. This is because it is disclosed within a relationship of trust between the patient and the healthcare professional. Confidential patient information combines data that identifies a person with details about their health or care. It can only be used in a way that the person would reasonably expect. This expectation has become common law through a number of judgments in court and is known as the Duty of Confidentiality. It continues to apply even after an individual has died. In England and Wales, confidential patient information can only be shared if one of 4 lawful bases is met. The patient's consent is implied for the data to be used for their own care. The patient has given their explicit consent for the data to be shared. Specific legislation is being used to set aside the duty of confidentiality, known as a statutory provision, or disclosing the information is justified in the public interest. As a data applicant, you will need to explain which lawful basis you will rely on for your project. Relying on public interest is used rarely and is subject to national guidance. Most data applicants rely on either explicit patient consent or a statutory provision. A statutory provision, such as Section 251 of the NHS Act 2006, allows the duty of confidentiality to be lifted temporarily so that confidential patient information can be used for specific purposes without patient consent. There are statutory provisions, for example, for data use in a pandemic, and provisions change when new laws and regulations are passed. The duty of confidentiality must be met or legally set aside for all processing of confidential patient information that needs to happen for your project, even if that processing all happens before you receive the data. And remember that any data that identifies or could identify an individual also comes within the scope of data protection legislation like GDPR and the Data Protection Act, and custodians will also be checking carefully that these additional requirements will be met. For example, when satisfying GDPR, you will need to state which provisions in Article 6 and Article 9 you intend to rely on. Finally, the public or transparency information you produce about your project is an extremely important part of meeting these requirements. All projects must use data fairly, legally, and in a way that both protects privacy and benefits patients and the public. Being clear how you will meet these requirements is key to successful data applications and to the safe and beneficial use of health and care data now and in the future.